Piers Morgan recently had on Mosab Hassan Yousef and Omar Baddar. I may be butchering his last name, but the debate between Mosab and Omar is very clear about who really understands this from an analytical perspective.
Are you sorry that he's dead?
Piers, before I answer your question, I think there's something that your audience has to know about Mosab, who's on this program. He is simply just not a serious person. Puts on this really dumb, put-on, angry face and barks incredibly shallow slogans about Israel being wonderful and its opponents being terrible and terrorists and so on. It's not really a real point of analysis. Look, Nasrallah, if you want me to talk about his legacy, that's a really easy thing to do. He was a hero throughout the entire Arab world for having driven Israel out of South Lebanon in 2000, for delivering Israel its first defeat in 2006.
Mosab, first of all, your response to the personal attack that was launched on you at the start of...
I'm not going to comment on that. I know who I am. I know what I am. I lived the conflict. I witnessed. I'm an eyewitness. I lived half of my life in what's so-called Palestinian society, and I spent the other half of my life with the Jewish community. When I speak on the authority of experience that is representing both cultures. One culture is a culture of death that has been sacrificing children for political and financial gain. And Omar is coming here to the West, carrying the false Palestinian identity, hiding behind a couple of Western values, trying to manipulate and deceive American and Western audience by showing somebody like Hassan Nasrallah and Ayatollah and Sinwar and the rest of the proxy leaders. These people are reckless. They started the war on October 7, and Israel had the right to defend itself. And Hezbollah has been launching missiles on civilians. They just killed 12 children as the whole world is watching on a playground. And that was Druze community, which is a great part of the Lebanese community. And no one leashed Hassan Nasrallah. How many times Omar and Mustafa's and Muhammad's complained or protested against Hezbollah aggression, taking advantage of Israel bleeding in the south? This is his punishment. Israel is legitimate when I stand for Israel. Why do I stand for Israel? Because Israel is the most legitimate ethnic group in the region, with evidence, overwhelming evidence to relationship to that land.
Yeah.
Omar and the Muslims
have
been trying for the past 1400 years to delegitimize and annihilate the Jewish people from that land. And they hate it so much that Israel is showing resilience and strength. You ask Omar if he's sad. Omar is mourning. Hassan Nasrallah is his hero. So let me tell Omar and his likes, listen, you cannot rewrite history. That Iran and all its proxies and the Muslim world behind it,
no, this is a very serious conversation.
Back off. There is going to be only the language of fire.
Mosab Hassan Yousef, I've said this since the beginning of my advocacy journey online, holds the utmost authority, and he himself talks about why he does, to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. His own father co-founded Hamas, the organization in which so many people across the world for the past 12 months, over 1 year, have decided to speak about so often. And the other reason he holds so much authority is he is from the West Bank. He was born and raised. He witnessed an incredible amount of bloodshed. So he saw all of these things that he's speaking about. At 6, 7, and 8 years old, the Israeli government wasn't paying Mosab to talk about what he talks about today. This is what he witnessed. And Omar, on the other hand, he's a political analyst, he's American, and he was formerly with the following 3 organizations: the IMEU, the Institute for Middle Eastern Understanding, the AAI, the Arab American Institute, and The Stream, which is Al Jazeera's own TV discussion show, which, of course, as you all know it, is produced in Qatar. Now, in a debate, what you want to do is typically not personally attack someone else. The second that you decide to personally attack someone else, your credibility goes down. Let's take a look at how Omar decided to begin his debate against Mosab Hassan Yousef, who globally holds the utmost authority to talk about the Middle Eastern conflict. Omar talks about how Mosab, with his demeanor and his anger and aggression, rightfully so, doesn't really come from a real point of analysis. Omar, how does attacking somebody personally make you come from a real point of analysis? Attacking somebody personally just shows that you don't really have an actual response to what the other person is presenting to you. In fact, this is how the debate began. The first point of action, the first point of initiation that you choose to deploy against somebody who you really have no authority to speak against is you choose to come at them personally. I've experienced this firsthand as somebody who has decided to speak up about the Middle Eastern conflict. And when I see that people who don't agree with my viewpoint choose to attack me personally, it's not because what I'm saying is wrong. A lot of the times it's because they have their own insecurities that they can't deal with themselves. They have to exploit those against someone else. But it also is because they really have no other collateral to use, so they choose to try and put someone else down in hopes that it hurts their feelings. But that's the wrong strategy when you look at the man across the table. Omar begins to say that today he talks about Nasrallah as a hero, while the other side of the conversation, people like Mosab, people like myself, people like Syrians, and I'll get to that in a second, have decided to call him a terrorist, somebody who has oppressed other people, somebody who has bloodshed forever on their hands for killing other Muslim people. Here's the thing, here's my issue with this conversation. Both sides cannot be correct. You cannot be a hero and a terrorist at the same time. There's no such thing. One is wrong. So it becomes a little bit subjective. How is it subjective then when Nasrallah was killed a couple weeks ago that we saw this coming out of Syria? So Omar, would you say that those Syrians who celebrated in the streets, would you say that the Lebanese people in Beirut who celebrated in Lebanon, would you say that other Arabs and Muslims across the world who celebrated Nasrallah's death, are they celebrating him as a hero too? You mourn when a hero was killed. You don't celebrate. You don't go to the streets and shoot off fireworks. You don't hand out candies to all of your neighbors. You don't stop traffic and get out of your car and blast music. That is what happened. But that is what you have chosen not to speak on behalf of. Why? Because it hurts your narrative. You're not willing to talk about it. It really is what happened. These are Syrians in the streets celebrating the person who you proclaimed to be, was such a hero in the world. But my other issue, Omar, is that a lot of the people who talk about the Palestinian narrative talk about how they are discriminated against, how they are dehumanized, how the world seems to ignore and remove their identity. Isn't that exactly what you do to Mosab? I mean, you claim for him not to be a real Muslim. You claim for him not to represent the nation. You claim for him to be an illegitimate voice. How is that possible? How is it possible for you to dehumanize him and then play the victim card of other people dehumanizing the narrative that you represent? You cannot have both, my friend. Mosab said it himself. He's spent half of his life with the Palestinian people and half of his life with the Jewish people. And regardless of where you sit on the fence, what side you have chosen to go with in this conversation, in this conflict, there are certain things that you have to agree with. And you have to agree to respect that experience and perspective that Mosab has as a human being. You cannot take that away from him. You can't take away the years he grew up in the West Bank witnessing the things that he did. You cannot take away the fact that he has chosen to speak up against something that most people haven't chosen to do. And what has it come at the expense of? His life, his family, his safety. Everyone thinks that Mosab Hassan Yousef has such an incredible life. He walks around the streets of America feeling unsafe. People know who he is. There is a massive target on his back. Why? It just comes to show the culture of this extreme ideology of the jihadist terrorism that we are seeing. When you speak up against what they believe in, what they preach, and it doesn't fit their narrative, they come for you. They come for you because they don't want people speaking up against what they know is wrong. But by muting more people in the world, and why do they want to come from Mosab? His father co-founded Hamas. For them, it would be an incredible achievement to wipe him out, to get him off of earth, to mute him, to remove his voice. He's the son of the person who founded the organization that started this whole thing in the first place. I've spoken about how Mosab holds authority to speak about this entire conversation. The same way that when I come across a Palestinian from Gaza, a Palestinian who was actually witnessing everything in his or her life, I want to listen to that person. It doesn't matter if what they're saying goes against the narrative that I believe in and that I find to be true based on real evidence. Real life experience and narrative is not something that you can dispute. And when Mosab says that he holds authority to speak on behalf of this entire narrative, it's because he speaks on behalf of experience. His ability to say that one side of this conversation has a perspective of death, with, in his own words, says they sacrifice people for their own political and financial incentives and benefits, which is exactly why we have heard the phrase human shields for such a long time. When Hamas, when Hezbollah, when they take their own citizens that they claim to care so much about, and they put them in front of them to be the ones on the receiving end of a response by a military after an attack that they started, they are shielding themselves behind humans in order for that mechanism to be recorded, to be put out into the world on social media, for other people to only see that exact mechanism happening, for them then to say Israel is deliberately targeting civilians. But behind those civilians are the ones who started this in the first place, which is exactly why the term human shield is literally the game plan for organizations, terrorists like Hamas, like Hezbollah. They don't care about the people in front of them dying. If they did, they would have found tunnels for their own people to go into. They would have taken the tunnels that they've built for themselves and allowed their citizens to come in. That's exactly why Mosab says these people are a death cult. Omar has an incredible advantage in this entire conflict, and many of the people who support the Hamas and Hezbollah narratives have an incredible advantage by becoming a proxy to the West, because many of the people who are listening to those like Omar are willfully ignorant, and they only want to hear more of what they already only know. And they only know a little bit. And when Omar goes against someone like Mosab Hassan Yousef, he's becoming a proxy to the viewers in the West, who he himself claims to be so brainwashed, but what he's doing at the same time is he's the one brainwashing them. So while Omar claims that people in the West have a complete false narrative of the discrimination against Palestinian people, he's actually brainwashing them even more to being so further against the Israeli narrative. Let me give you an example. If Omar stopped this interview, this debate, on Piers Morgan with Mosab and said, Piers, Mosab, you know what? I've heard what Mosab has to say. He's raised a really challenging debate. He's made a few really good points that have gotten me to think that actually, I'm not entirely sure if I stand with what I said a few minutes ago. In fact, Mosab, you've gotten me to think about some of my own biases in this conflict. Do you guys know what would happen? There would be a pool of people who were the best fans of Omar 13 seconds ago who would then say, you know what? Omar's wrong too. Omar's fake too. I'm never going to listen to him again. But there also would be a pool of people who were supporting Omar before, but Omar has them by his palm, would then say, maybe he's right. Why does it take that for people to begin to change their mind? Why does it take a cult of people? These people are closed-minded. They're not willing to critically think. Every time they press play on this video and they listen to Mosab, it's in one ear and out the other. But when they listen to Omar, it's in one ear and it stays. It remains. And this is the mechanism that happens because they only retain the information that they want. But how can you choose to be willfully so deaf and ignorant and blind and choose to walk away from information and perspective and experience and facts from Mosab Hassan Yousef, somebody who holds the most authority in the world about this conflict? If you watch the full interview, you'll notice that there are a few times Mosab says a few things about the conflict in Omar, and he doesn't agree. In fact, when Mosab brings up the entire incident of Hezbollah killing Druze children in northern Israel deliberately, a community which is very much well respected in Lebanon, Omar starts to shake his head in disagreement. But I find it fascinating that when Mosab brings up the whole idea of these people, these groups, this death cult of the IRGC and Hamas and Hezbollah, that these terrorists started this war on October 7th.
They started the war on October 7th, and Israel had the right to defend itself. And Hezbollah has been launching missiles on civilians.
Notice there is no change in Omar. His face doesn't change, his posture doesn't change, his emotion doesn't change. He doesn't even nod his head. So how can you agree with all of that and then make all these claims that the responses by them are justified? You can't have your cake and eat it too, my guy. If you agree, because we all can agree, go to the UN, look at who started this war on October 7th, 2023. Hamas, Hamas started this war, and we can agree on that. You just agreed with it by being silent. How then can you make the claim that military response by Israel from a terror initiation by Hamas and now joined by other proxies like Hezbollah and the Houthis, Iran, are unjustifiable? How can you say that when they continue to happen? It is October 2024, more than a year later, and rockets are still falling into Israel. But your silence has made me realize that you agree with me and Mosab that the people who you're defending are the ones who started this war. Pick a side of the fence. And suddenly when Mosab chooses to say something in response from real personal experience, from facts, from evidence, from really depicting the entire narrative that we have here, Omar chooses to say, peers, this is not a serious conversation. When did it not become serious? You know when it didn't become serious? Right when the conversation began. Omar, you started this conversation by personally attacking Mosab. And when peers gave Mosab the floor to respond to your personal attack, what did Mosab do? He said, I'm not even going to address that. Less is more, my guy. You know, there's a lot of irony in this debate, right? You have an American speaking on behalf of Hezbollah, and you have an Arab speaking on behalf of Israel. A Palestinian, Mosab Hassan Yousef, who I know does not identify himself as one, but to the world, he's a Palestinian from the West Bank. How is it that Omar claims that the West, everyone in the West is so brainwashed, but he's the one, an American from the West, in the West, having this debate in America, he's the one representing Hezbollah on the other side of the ocean, in Beirut, in Lebanon. He's the one doing it. But yet the people in America are brainwashed. No, the people in America are brainwashed because of people like you, not because of Mosab. They don't even listen to Mosab. How can they be brainwashed by someone who they're willfully ignorant towards? They choose not to listen to him. And yet people like Omar want to say that Mosab is illegitimate. How is he illegitimate when the only thing that he's providing is real facts and evidence and personal experience that just hurt Omar's narrative? That is why he's illegitimate. That's why this isn't a serious conversation. It's not a serious conversation to you, Omar, because you have nothing else to say in response. Why don't you have anything else to say in response? Because who you are going up against is the single human being breathing on planet Earth who holds the utmost authority to talk about the Middle Eastern Israeli-Palestinian conflict, not because he's so knowledgeable, not because he's a politician or a geopolitician or a geopolitical analyst or a military expert. It's because he is born and raised in the area in which the entire world has chosen to debate and talk about for the past year. And he holds personal experiences that are embedded into his mind and his life, that he has inside of his eyes, in his vision, in his memory bank, that nobody can take away. But you claim that not to be serious. That is something you should never ever go up against, and especially in the beginning, personally attack, because it hurts your own narrative. Yesterday here in Israel, we had sirens in the middle of the day because terrorists from Hezbollah decided to fire rockets directly at central Israel. And there's a video circulating right now by Elon Levy, who posted a clip of people in Tel Aviv at the boardwalk 5 minutes from where I am, rushing to get into a bomb shelter. I'm gonna read out loud Elon's tweet with the video, and then I want you to look at Omar's response. So here's the video. You can see, you know, kids, families, everybody is rushing in to get into the bomb shelter. And this is sort of the life of people every single time in Tel Aviv, or for example, this is Tel Aviv, but anywhere in the country. Luckily, the people in Tel Aviv have 90 seconds. In this area in the country, you have about 90 seconds to get to a bomb shelter. That is not the case in other places, but I want you to look at what Elon wrote. He says, "This war can't end when our enemies simply stop shooting missiles, and we hope they won't restart. It has to end when they can't shoot missiles anymore." Omar replied to his tweet and he said, "He's literally saying Israel will never accept peace that isn't based on total domination of the region. Israel's ability to brutalize and terrorize whoever it wants, whenever it wants, is perfectly fine with him, but everyone else must be disarmed." Omar, that's not what Elon is saying. Elon is not saying that they can brutalize and terrorize whoever it wants, whenever it wants. The issue with your kind of rhetoric here, Omar, is that you yourself aren't differentiating between terrorists and civilians. Elon is differentiating between terrorists and civilians. Civilians, the kids and the women in Beirut and the kids and the women in Gaza, they're not launching rockets. Hamas is launching rockets. Hezbollah is launching rockets. Yes, we did see civilians in clothes just like mine join Hamas on October 7th. So actually it is a little bit harder to differentiate between the two, but we know that kids are not the ones lighting a rocket off to go into Israel. And for that to continue to happen, honestly means that we continue to play ping pong back and forth. They fire, we respond. They fire, we respond. They fire, we respond. It's not going to stop. Elon is saying for the sake of ending any possibility of a threat into Israel, what do you have to do? You don't just attack the symptom of cancer. You attack the source of it. You don't put a bandage on. You don't put a finger on the dam. You figure out how to stop everything. It's long term. We're trying to create longevity here, safety and peace in the region, not just for Israeli people, for the people in Gaza, for the people in Lebanon. They don't want to be oppressed by Hamas and Hezbollah anymore. The same way that Israeli people do not want to have to live under the threat of this video that Elon is sharing with everyone. So your depiction of what he's saying is a complete misrepresentation of what he's implying. He did not imply go kill and target civilians. We know that the IDF does whatever it is that they can to limit civilian casualty, but those are the things that you yourself, Omar, choose to willfully ignore. Who doesn't willfully ignore it? The Arab, the Palestinian that you've chosen to debate against. That's who. So anytime that I see somebody have the kahunas really to debate and go against Mosab Hassan Yousef, I get excited. I'm waiting for somebody to make a really good case against him. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to make a good case against somebody who's speaking on behalf of experience. I cannot stress how important it is to, even if it's somebody that goes against your perspective and narrative, when you listen to somebody on behalf of experience, it only adds to the conversation. There are many people in the West Bank, there are many people in Gaza, there are many people in Lebanon who have experiences of witnessing bloodshed. And some of this bloodshed is at the result of war. We do know that civilians do die during war. Name one war in the world, Omar, where civilians don't die. So it is part of the conversation, and it is sad to see. It's also very unfortunate that a lot of the media is focused on all of that happening. So it only makes it seem like that is the only indiscriminate action being taken place. But there's no context to anything. Mosab could have easily pulled the card by saying, you're sitting in America. You're representing Hezbollah from America. You are exactly where they want you. He didn't pull that card, given the situation, given his own experience. And this is why I continue to have respect for Mosab, and why I will never have respect for Omar, especially by beginning this debate by attacking him on a platform like Piers Morgan.